On December 2nd, in a quiet, wooded area in Pace, Florida, investigators discovered something no parent should ever have to imagine: a young girl's body, burned beyond recognition, an electric scooter lying nearby, and evidence of violence that would shock an entire community. Her name was Danika Troy. She was just 14 years old, and the two people responsible for her death were supposed to be her peers. This is the story of a tragedy that began with hurtful words and ended in unthinkable violence. Danika Troy was a 14-year-old girl living in Pace, Florida. Like many teenagers, she navigated the complexities of friendships, social dynamics, and the everyday challenges of being young. Those who knew her described a life full of ordinary teenage moments, going to school, spending time with friends, and riding her electric scooter around the neighborhood. She was a daughter, a friend, and a member of a community that would soon be devastated by her loss. Her mother, Ashley Troy, would later share photos of Danika online, asking people to remember her daughter not for how she died, but for who she was. A young girl with her whole life ahead of her, a life that would be cut short in the most brutal way imaginable. On November 30th, Danika Troy was reported missing. For any parent, those first hours are agonizing. Questions flood the mind. Where is she? Is she safe? Will she come home? For Ashley Troy, the nightmare was just beginning. The hours turned into a day, then another. Search efforts began. Friends, family, and community members looked for any sign of Danika. Her electric scooter was gone too, which initially offered a small hope. Maybe she had just gone somewhere on her own. Maybe she'd lost track of time. Maybe she was okay. But as the hours passed, that hope began to fade. By December 2nd, the worst fears of everyone searching for Danika were about to be confirmed in the most horrific way possible. On December 2nd, just 2 days after Danika was reported missing, her body was discovered in a wooded area in Pace, Florida. Next to her remains was her electric scooter, the same one she had with her when she disappeared. But this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a case of a young girl getting lost in the woods. What investigators found told a much darker story. Danika's body had been burned, clearly an attempt to destroy evidence, and the forensic examination would reveal something even more disturbing. She had suffered gunshot wounds before the fire was set. This was murder, calculated, deliberate, and the investigation that followed would reveal that the people responsible were closer to Danika's age than anyone could have imagined. The community was shattered. Parents held their children tighter. Questions began to surface. Who could do something like this, and why? Law enforcement moved quickly. Within days, investigators had identified 2 suspects. Both of them were teenagers. Gabriel Williams, 16 years old, and Kimahri Blevins, just 14, the same age as Danika. The investigation revealed disturbing details. Gabriel Williams had stolen his mother's handgun. That weapon would become the murder weapon. Kimahri Blevins had helped plan the attack and critically had talked about it to a witness. That conversation would become a key piece of evidence. But here's where the story becomes even more troubling. Kimahri's mother noticed something unusual on the night Danika disappeared. She saw her son sneaking back into the house around 11 p.m. When questioned, he lied about where he had been. It was a detail that would later prove crucial to the investigation. Forensic evidence painted a clear picture. Danika had been shot multiple times. Then, in what investigators believe was an attempt to cover up the crime, her body was set on fire. The boys then left the scene, leaving Danika's electric scooter beside her. Both Gabriel Williams and Kimahri Blevins were arrested and charged in connection with Danika's murder. The evidence against them was overwhelming, but the question that haunted everyone was simple and devastating. Why? According to the boys, the motive was a falling out with Danika. They claimed she had made hurtful comments that upset them. Words, that was their justification. Hurtful words. But investigators saw through this almost immediately. Police stated publicly that the motive the boys provided didn't match the forensic evidence. Think about what that means. The level of violence, the planning, the theft of a gun, the deliberate act of setting a body on fire. This wasn't a spontaneous reaction to being upset. This was premeditated murder. Two teenage boys made a choice. They chose to steal a weapon. They chose to plan an attack. They chose to take a young girl's life, and they chose to try to cover it up by burning her body. The community struggled to understand. How does a disagreement between teenagers escalate to murder? How do two young boys justify taking a life over words, over a falling out? One community member captured the sentiment perfectly. They had a choice. They chose revenge. In the wake of imaginable tragedy, Ashley Troy faced the impossible task of grieving her daughter while the world watched. But her response revealed a strength that many found remarkable. She stated publicly that she doesn't hate the boys who killed her daughter, she hates what they did. It's a distinction that speaks to a level of grace that few could muster in similar circumstances. But make no mistake, Ashley Troy wants justice, full justice, for Danika, for the life that was stolen, for the future her daughter will never have. She asked people online to share pictures of Danika, to remember her, to keep her memory alive. Because in the end, that's what matters. Not the horror of how she died, but the fact that she lived, that she mattered, that she was loved. Even with arrests made and charges filed, questions remain. What exactly happened in the moments before Danika was killed? What was the real motive behind such extreme violence? And how did two teenage boys convince themselves that murder was an acceptable response to whatever conflict they were experiencing? Police have made it clear that the motive the suspects provided doesn't align with the evidence. So what really drove them to commit such a brutal act? Was there more to the story than a simple falling out? Or does that make it even more terrifying that such senseless violence truly came from something so trivial? These are questions that may never be fully answered, but they're questions that haunt everyone who's followed this case. 14 years old. That's how old Danika Troy was when her life was taken from her. She should be in high school right now. She should be thinking about her future, about college, about all the possibilities that lie ahead when you're young and the world still feels full of potential. Instead, a community mourns, a mother grieves, and two teenage boys face the consequences of a choice they can never take back. This case reminds us of a painful truth. Violence can come from anywhere, even from the places and people we least expect. Words matter, but that nothing, no insult, no argument, no falling out, justifies taking a human life. Danika Troy's story didn't have to end this way. Gabriel Williams and Kimahri Blevins had choices. Every step of the way they had choices, and they chose violence. They chose murder. They chose to take away everything Danika could have been. As the legal process moves forward, one thing remains clear. Justice for Danika means remembering her, sharing her story, and ensuring that her life, short as it was, meant something.